Hello guys, Lucas here. It's been 2 years since I last posted a video, and I was planning this triumphant return into my channel this month. I've been working on lots of cool things, but then something happened, and something that rustled my jimmies, something that made me pretty upset, and it involves two companies, Apple and Patreon. Now, for those who don't know, Patreon is an online platform that lets people support their creators financially. You can go on my Patreon page and donate $15, $20, $100, $300 a month, and it allows me to do what I do and to be supported by the community to do my work without having to rely on advertisers and other forms of income. It's a great platform, and for many people, myself included in the past, it's their primary source of income. And not just because Patreon has been around for a very long time, but because they also take a very small amount of money from artists compared to other platforms. Me, for example, because I joined pretty early, I only pay Patreon 5%. But then Apple comes along, and Apple has something to say. Now, imagine you've been renting out this apartment for over 15 years, paying the same price every single year, and then one day your landlord comes up and says, in 2 months, you will have to pay 600% more. Good luck. Bye-bye. Well, that's exactly what Apple did to Patreon. Now, I've always enjoyed Apple products. I think a lot of them are pretty well designed, even the stupid ones, like the Apple Vision Pro behind me. However, there was always one thing that really bothered me about Apple, and I'm not talking about all their very anti-consumer right to repair stuff, because there's that. I'm talking about their App Store policies, because they are a load of barnacles, and Apple is just making excuses to make money. That's about it. Now, Apple loves to say that they need to charge 30% off of every transaction that happens inside the iPhone to run the App Store and to keep the iPhone safe. Now, if you're a developer like me, you know that it doesn't cost that much money to keep the App Store running. And if you were raised in the streets like I was, then you know that if somebody comes to you and says, you have to pay me 30% of what you make for security, then you know that's not a partner. That is a mobster, and you should call the police. And that is what Apple did to Patreon. They told them that starting November, all the subscriptions made on the iOS app, Apple's gonna take 30%. They don't care that this is possibly 6 times more than what these artists are used to giving away. Apple's gonna get their 30%, and that's that, because Apple cares about artists. I mean, isn't that their whole marketing spiel? That Apple's the artist one? Actually, I just remembered that Apple did that commercial in which is literally crushing all artists and creativity. And oh boy, this is a good fit. This is a good look, Apple. Now, I know that there's some people in the comments who are hyped as hell right now saying that Apple owns iOS, so they can do whatever they want with it. And, you know, we don't know. It is very likely that a lot of the stuff they're doing right now is actually not legal. The government is suing Apple for a number of anti-competitive reasons. However, even if they are legal, I think there's a strong argument that maybe doing the things in the way that they're doing, maybe it's not right. And legal and right, not always the same thing. Now, Patreon is dealing with this news the best it can. It's giving creators options, and honestly, creators, they're sort of panicking right now because it's already hard to be a creator, and now we're just found out that we have to pay taxes twice, once for Apple and once for the government. So this is a major L for artists. It really sets a bad precedent and really shows how much of a monopoly Apple has on the App Store. And here, I would like to take a moment to talk about Apple's 30% tax and where it comes from, because I don't hear enough people talking about the history of it, and I think once you learn about it, it makes even less sense, and you're like, why? This is too much money. So back in the good old days when grass was green and rivers flowed with joy, there was an organization called Valve, and they had a product called Steam. Now, Steam had this little interesting proposition. You see, back then, if you wanted to release a game, you would have to release it physically. You have to make hundreds of thousands of boxes and art and CDs and distribute them everywhere across the country. Retailers, you would need to do a lot of work to make sure that people could buy your games. And they were like, wait, what if you released this digitally, which was not a thing back then? What if you could release them without having to go through all the hassle? What if we could save you millions of dollars and give you this new way of launching a game, and all that we take is 30%? This is how it started. Now, developers were giving away a huge chunk of their revenue, but they were saving a lot of money in return. It made sense. The return on investment was worth it. It was a good deal. Then just a couple of years after, Apple and Google launched their app stores, and they need to charge developers a certain amount of money to launch stuff into their digital marketplace. Now, they didn't know how much to charge, so they looked over at Valve, they realized how much developers were paying on that store, and they just slapped 30% on theirs. They did not charge 30% because that's how much it took to run the store. They did not charge 30% because that's how much money it's saving you. They charged 30% because they saw developers were willing to do it. And most of that is profit. And to be perfectly honest, it doesn't even make sense for Valve to be charging 30% anymore. Because physical distribution, it's not really a thing anymore. Digital is the standard, and it's cheaper to run every single year. But they're still charging 30%. It doesn't make sense. And companies like Epic Games prove this. They've been running their own Epic Games store, which is a competitor to Steam, and it's an online marketplace just like all these other ones, Meta included, and they charge 12%. And they're fine. They're making money. Because you know what? It's not that expensive to run. The 30% tax is complete bullcrap. And you know what? I don't like it when they charge us 30% off of a purchase or a microtransaction. I don't like it, but I could sort of live with it. But when Apple decides to target donations and literally the income of artists, the people that the company says they champion, that crosses a line for me. That's not a good look. That's bad. Don't do that. You know, it's already kind of a bad time to be an artist. We know AI is coming in on the horizon. There's all these things happening, and this is just another thing on top of it all. So it's pretty exhausting. And what bothers me most is that also Apple has this little gag order. You know, if you're a developer with an app, you're not allowed to tell people that if they were signing up for this thing on a browser, they'd be saving a bunch of money. Because Apple doesn't want you to inform people that they're being scammed. Apple doesn't want you to tell people the truth. And nothing should be a greater indicator that this is not good leadership than a company that literally will ban you from the App Store if you are just telling users the truth. So that's the situation we're in right now. If you're an artist on Patreon, I feel your pain. I think everything's going to be all right. In the grand scheme of things, we'll figure it out. We'll stick together. We'll work through this. But it's not fair. It's stupid. It makes no sense. I wish it wasn't this way. And if you enjoyed this, like, share. I believe this should be a conversation. I think this is not okay. And I hope you enjoyed me rambling. If you enjoyed this style of video, let me know, because the future ones are going to be more like this. So subscribe, do all that stuff. And if you want, you can support me on Patreon before the 30% bump on all subscriptions. Fuck Apple.